Many years ago, in the beautiful city of Prague, which was ruled by a powerful and wise king named Charles IV. During this time, the city was bustling with activity and excitement because workers were busy building two of the most important structures in Prague's history: the magnificent Charles Bridge that would stretch across the river, and the incredible Prague astronomical clock, which would become one of the most famous clocks in the entire world. Into this busy and exciting city came a simple country boy named Jimmy, who had traveled all the way from his small village in the countryside. Jimmy wasn't alone on his journey. He brought along his faithful companion, a goat, who went with him everywhere. Around the same time, another young man called Matthew also arrived in Prague. Unlike Jimmy, Matthew had come to the city with a very specific purpose. He wanted to study with Master Heinrich, who was known throughout the land as one of the smartest and most talented craftsmen and inventors of his time. Jimmy and his trusty goat managed to find work helping to construct the Grand Charles Bridge. They go to the construction site where dozens of workers were busy cutting stone, hammering nails, and building the massive bridge piece by piece. The work was hard and tiring, but Jimmy was happy to have a job in the big city. While Jimmy was working on the bridge, a young woman walked onto the bridge carrying iron nails for the construction workers. Her name was Katie. And the moment Jimmy laid eyes on her, he had fallen deeply and completely in love with Katie at first glance. Jimmy couldn't stop thinking about Katie because he was so in love and couldn't get Katie out of his mind. So he began to carefully carve a beautiful statue of Katie into one of the large wooden support beams that was holding up part of the bridge. He didn't realize he was weakening the beam. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but the damage was severe. When the other workers discovered what had happened and saw Jimmy's carved statue in what remained of the support beam, they were furious with him. They were banned from ever returning. While all of this was happening, Master Heinrich was hard at work on his greatest creation yet, the Prague astronomical clock. This wasn't going to be an ordinary clock that simply told the time. Instead, it would be a magnificent masterpiece covered with intricate carvings and beautiful statues. Master Heinrich needed skilled sculptors and talented wood carvers who would bring his vision to life. So he spent his days walking through the city searching for craftsmen with the right skills. One day, as he was walking near where the bridge was being built, he happened to catch a glimpse on Jimmy's statue. Master Heinrich could immediately see that Jimmy had an extraordinary natural talent for wood carving. The details in the statue were remarkable, the face was expressive, and the proportions were perfect. Master Heinrich knew right away that this young man could be valuable to his astronomical clock project, despite his recent mistake at the bridge. Meanwhile, Matthew was having a very difficult time in Prague. He had come to the city full of hope and dreams of becoming a great scholar by studying with Heinrich. The old man had agreed to teach Matthew, which was a great honor, but Matthew's life as a student was far from easy. The other students who studied in Prague came from wealthy families. They wore fine clothes and had comfortable places to sleep at night. Matthew, on the other hand, was extremely poor. His clothes were old and worn. He often went hungry, and he had no money to rent a room anywhere in the city. At night, he wandered through the streets of Prague looking for shelter. Matthew came upon a large old house that looked like it had been empty for a very long time, and no one seemed to live there anymore. Matthew soon learned that this was the famous Horst House, named after a legendary man who was said to have made a deal with the devil himself many years ago. According to the stories people told, Dr. Faust had practiced dark magic in this house and had eventually been dragged down to hell by demons. Because of these frightening tales, no one in Prague dared to step inside the house, and it had been abandoned and left to decay. Matthew was desperate for a place to sleep, and he didn't believe in the scary stories, so he decided to make the forest house his home. It was cold, drafty, and filled with shadows, but at least it gave him shelter from the rain and wind. Matthew would study Master Hanish's plans by candlelight in the empty rooms, trying to ignore the creaking floorboards and the strange sounds the old house made at night. Day after day, the wealthy students continued to mock and ridicule Matthew. They would whisper and laugh whenever he walked by, and to make them stop treating him so cruelly, he wished he had money so he could buy nice clothes like they wore, or so he could offer to buy them drinks and food the way wealthy students did for each other. As he opened the door, something on the table caught his eye. A coin. But this wasn't an ordinary coin. It was a great dollar, a mysterious piece of money that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. The very next day, he used the coin to buy drinks for the other students at the tavern. The others became friendly toward him. Matthew felt happy for the first time since his arrival at Prague. He thought he had finally won their acceptance and friendship, but he didn't realize that the wealthy students were only pretending to be his friends. They didn't really care about him at all. They just wanted to use him and play a cruel trick on him. While Matthew was enjoying what he thought was genuine friendship, the students made a secret plan. They knew that Matthew was in charge of guarding the important plans for the astronomical clock, and they decided to use this against him. When they were done, they carefully arranged the plans to look like nothing did happen. Matthew had no idea of this. The next day, when Hanish asked for the plans, Matthew simply picked them up and handed them over, completely unaware of what had happened. The counselors noticed this. They saw that the plans were completely ruined. They were paying for the astronomical clock to be built, and so they were furious when they saw the destroyed plans. So much money and time had been wasted. Someone had to be punished for this terrible crime. Since Matthew had been responsible for guarding the plans, everyone assumed he was the one who had destroyed them. The counselors demanded that he be punished severely. Matthew was placed in a pillory in the town square so that everyone passing by could see him and throw rotten food at him or mock him. He had to stand there for an entire day while people laughed at him, insulted him, and threw garbage at him. The worst part was that Matthew had no idea what he had actually done wrong. He decided that Master Hanish was to blame for his suffering. If Master Hanish had defended him to the counselors, none of this would have happened. Matthew vowed he would get revenge on the old man, no matter what it took. Matthew's heart had begun to turn dark. The devil appeared to him and offered him a deal. In exchange for Matthew's soul, the devil would give him power and the ability to get his revenge. He signed his name in blood on a contract with Satan himself, selling his soul in exchange for dark power. Despite all the problems and setbacks, Master Hanish and Jemmy worked tirelessly on the astronomical clock. Together, they spent countless hours carefully crafting every gear, every statue, and every detail of the magnificent clock. Jemmy proved to be an excellent student and a dedicated worker. He learned quickly, and his carvings were beautiful. Finally, after months of exhausting work, the Prague astronomical clock was finished. It was absolutely magnificent, a masterpiece of art. The statues that Jemmy had carved were lifelike and beautiful. When the clock was unveiled to the public, crowds of people gathered to stare at it in wonder. But despite creating something so incredible, Master Hanish and Jemmy received no respect or recognition from the Prague councillor or the wealthy people of the city. Not long after the clock was completed, visitors arrived in Prague from far away in China. These Chinese dignitaries heard about the amazing astronomical clock, and they traveled all the way across the world to see it for themselves. When they saw the clock, they were so impressed that they approached Master Hanish with an incredible offer. They wanted him to travel to China and build another clock in their city. They offered him a fortune in gold and promised him great honor and respect in their land. Matthew, who had been watching from the shadows, overheard the entire conversation. An opportunity to destroy Hamish. His heart, once full of hope and dreams, was now filled with nothing but hatred and desire for revenge. Matthew went home and spent the entire night writing a letter. Councillors were proud and suspicious men who wouldn't want their city's greatest treasure to be replicated elsewhere. When the councillors received Matthew's letter, they were outraged. They didn't bother to investigate whether the accusations were true or to give Master Hamish a chance to defend himself. Instead, the mayor immediately called for the city's executioner, a fearsome man, and gave him a terrible order. He was to blind Master Hamish by cutting out his eyes. This cruel punishment was meant to ensure that he could never build another astronomical clock for anyone, as his sight was taken from him forever. The pain was unbearable, not just the physical pain of losing his eyes, but the emotional pain of being betrayed by the city he had served. His heart was filled with a burning desire for revenge. Even though he was now blind, knew his clock so well that he sought the help from Kate and deliberately stops the clock. It no longer kept time, the figures no longer moved, and all its amazing functions stopped working. Everyone was devastated seeing this, and when the guards came to the top, they saw Kate and blamed her for everything. When the Frog councillors discovered that the astronomical clock was broken, they were furious and panicked. Having it broken was embarrassing and unacceptable. They needed someone to fix it immediately. They summoned Jemmy to the council chambers. He had to fix the astronomical clock, and he had to do it quickly. That if he didn't fix the clock in time, they would execute Katie by hanging her in public square. Jimmy was terrified. His hands shook and his heart pounded. He loved Katie more than anything in the world. He wasn't sure if he could fix such a complicated mechanism. Master Hamish had been the true genius behind the clock. Still, he had no choice. If he didn't try, Katie would die. Jimmy worked tirelessly to repair the clock. He barely slept. Hour after hour, Jimmy examined each part of the clock, trying to understand how Master Hamish had sabotaged it and how to fix the damage. The deadline the councillors had given was approaching rapidly. Katie was being held in a dark prison cell, terrified and crying, not understanding why this was happening to her. As the final moments ticked away, Jimmy made one last adjustment to the clock's mechanism. He turned the final gear into place and held his breath. The clock began to tick. The hands started moving. The figures began their mechanical dance. The clock was working again. Jimmy's heart leaped with joy and relief. He had done it. He had fixed the clock. Now he just had to get to the town square in time to stop Katie's execution. The execution had already taken place. Jimmy fell to his knees and began to sob. He had fixed the clock, but he was late. The love of his life was dead. He slowly stood up and walked to the nearest church. He went inside, fell to his knees before the altar, and began to pray. With all his heart and soul, Jimmy prayed to God, begging for a miracle. He heard footsteps behind him, turned around, and there, walking into the church, was Katie, alive. Jimmy couldn't believe his eyes. Katie explained, the goat had been hanged in Katie's place. As Jimmy and Katie were sitting there, grieving the goat fell from the rope. Something metal clattered onto the ground. This iron tube had protected the goat's neck from being crushed by the rope. In the end, both Katie and the goat were safe. As for Matthew, his fate was darker.